Good afternoon to everyone. We will get started here in just a couple of minutes. Okay, I want to thank everyone for being here today. This is our May family webinar presented by Region 10 ESC and Partners Resource Network. This is our final family webinar of the school year. So we have loved having everyone be a part of these this year, and we are in the process of planning some great webinars for next school year as well. Today, Jim Wright is going to be presenting for us. We're very happy that he is here, and he will be presenting about a parent's perspective on Medicaid waivers. We know this is a topic that many families have a lot of questions about, and so we are so happy to have Jim to share information with us. I will turn it over to him.
Thanks, Sarah. It's great to be speaking as well as watching all these webinars we have this year. There's been some great information. Partners Resource Network is the state's PTI, Parent Training Information Center. We are funded by the Department of Education, and all states are required to have at least one PTI under IDA law. Texas is so large that we have four. So the area that Region 10 in is called the PAC Project. And the PAC Project has, I forgot that did okay. The PAC Project includes regions 7, 8, 10, and 11, which is Northeast Texas, Dallas, and Fort Worth metro areas. So we are grant funded. We are the statewide network of Parent Training Information Center. And, the purpose is to help enhance the lives of people with disabilities and families through education, information, parent-to-parent support, and advocacy. And, we believe firmly that the parent is the best advocate for a child. And so we try to build those skills and capacity for the parent to understand their rights and understand how, what the law says and what TEA says, and how to ask the right questions and making sure that we're getting the right support for our children, because it's can be an overwhelming and daunting experience as a parent. One thing that's interesting about Partners Resource Network is the vast majority of our coordinators, like I am, are also parents of children with special needs. I have two. One is about to age out of the Frisco ISD system. He is 22. He has like 3 weeks of school left, and then he will go on to his next phase of his life. He has Down syndrome. He's legally blind, and he's both of my kids, I think, are definite success stories through the collaboration of parents in school and the services that the schools provide to help them reach their potential. And my younger son is 19. He's a freshman at UT, and I guess after this week he'll be, quote, a junior because he had so many AP classes. But he had dyslexia, and he was served under a 504, and then he also had speech when he was younger, so served under IDA, IEP system. So he had kind of both roles there. And again, he's come a long ways from when he was a little guy till now, to where his potential is much better received and on the path to success. And so I really do think how the system is set up, it can be successful, but it is always stressful. There's no doubt about that. And so we provide information, training, referral, education, assistance, and support. And, we try to help you understand your child's disability, learn what the resources are out there. We have curriculum that we do trainings, and then to understand, your rights a little bit better. And we want to make you an equal participant in the ARD process. Our main office is located in Euless, Texas, but our coordinators, we do work out of our homes. And so we do mostly telework or via our car. So why we're here today, Texas Medicaid waivers. Those are the scary things that when your child is born that you need to understand as you're trying to figure out everything else about your child's disabilities. Um, I think one of the best websites that I have found is this Navigate Life Texas, and we will be sending out this presentation and have the links available for you to look at more in depth. Um, but Navigate Life Texas, they have great information to help parents to navigate the Medicaid system and to understand, what the rights are and what services they provide. So my older child, he was under a program called MDCP, Medically Dependent Child Program, um, because of his vision and his cognition issues. But the state changed the criteria for that, and then he was dismissed from that program a few years ago, and then we were able to get him onto the HCS Home Community Services Program. And so that's one of the waiver programs that you have to have your name come up on a list. These lists are, they say 8 to 10 years, but from my experience and talking to other parents, they're closer to 15 to 20 years unless current funding changes. And every 2 years when we have our legislature, they decide how much they're going to fund those lists. And so the list can get longer or shorter, depends on how our legislature decides how they're going to fund those programs. So if you're not sure your child is going to need these services, I encourage you to get on the wait list, and we'll talk about how you do that a little bit later. Again, it's your list doesn't start until you actually enroll in those lists. The eligibility, you can kind of determine that later on to see, whether you truly qualify for those services, because when your name comes up list, you will have to requalify to show that your paperwork, your doctor's notes and your psychological reports and all that kind of stuff. Kind of like getting SSI, that same process is very, very similar, but you do have to have documentation to prove or ensure that they do qualify under their guidelines. So waivers are part of a federal program that each state administers. It's how to allocate Medicaid funds. The idea is that instead of having institutions that we had when our parents were young and when some of us were young, our people with disabilities generally went to institutions. And so there was some advocacy on the family's behalf that people would probably thrive better in a home or community settings. And that's actually a little bit more cost effective for the government too. So that's a dual purpose for having the home and community services. Um, some of the services you get personal care for helps with things like bathing, dressing, nursing care if there's a need, home modifications if there's a need, car modifications. Again, always have to have a need, respite care and certain therapies. And there's another program called CLASS, and I do not know what that stands for off the top of my head, but the CLASS waiver tends to focus more on therapies and supports of the development of the child. And HCS tends to provide more long-term home and community supports. So there are two different lists. The CLASS list is generally a little bit quicker to get through, but sometimes people are on CLASS and they come up for HCS and they say, should I be on this waiver or that waiver? Because you cannot be on two waivers at one time. You can only be on one waiver. So you have to learn the pros and cons. And if you choose not to become on the new waiver that came up, you don't get to be next in line when you choose to. You go to the bottom of the list. So it's a very, very difficult, emotional, and important decision on the behalf of your child or adult child with a disability. There are waivers because certain Medicaid requirements are waived, meaning they don't apply. The most important one is the income requirement. Um, when the child is under 18 to get SSI or other means programs, they consider the family's income. But under these waiver programs, you only consider the child's income, and generally that income is zero. So that's how you become eligible for those waivers. And then getting the services, they also get Medicaid to go along with that. So you may have private insurance as well as Medicaid. And if that is the case, your primary insurance is your primary, and then your Medicaid is secondary, and you have to have those coexist. And that's again getting to complicated. So you have to have doctors, if they only take primary, they won't take Medicaid, then you have to pay out of pocket. If your doctor takes Medicaid, they will bill primary first, then Medicaid second. And again, the state does encourage that type of arrangement because the liability goes more onto the insurance company in case we have a hospitalization or a more serious type of thing. And so like my son, he has been hospitalized probably on average about every 4 years for some illness through his respiratory system. And then when he was a little guy, he had probably 35 to 40 procedures under anesthesia to help with his development of his eyes and to protect his vision. And so having the primary insurance gave us access to doctors that we could choose, and then having the Medicaid, they paid all the copays and the deductibles. And so it was very helpful for us as a family because if you have a child with a disability, you realize that it's a lot more expensive than just your typical child. So we have 7 waivers, and each has their own interest list. And we have a kind of going later in the slide, we'll have those listed out, and we'll have links to each of those. The waivers are managed by the Health and Human Services Commission. So how do you add your child to the interest list? You don't have to necessarily prove they're eligible. You may have to do a soft approval at some MHMRs. I've heard like Metrocare, they make sure they have a diagnosis of an intellectual disability, some basic type of stuff, but you don't necessarily have to have the psychological done at that point. Um, then there's a state number that you can call, and then they'll refer you to your local mental health authority or it's called your LIDA. That used to be called MHMR, but since some of those terms are no longer fashionable, we've just changed it to MHMR as opposed to what they stand for. And some counties, they still call it MHMR, and some counties have different named agencies. Like Collin County has LifePath Systems, Dallas County has MetroCare, um, Rockwall going out east, they have, God, I just went blank on their name. Excuse me. Uh, I think I have it listed later. So you want to call your local mental health authority. If you have a disability that has to do with mental health, there's a yes waiver program that has its own criteria. We're not going to get into that too much today because it's kind of a different pathway, but it is available if your child does have significant mental health issues. You want to call your LIDA, and here's a link to tell you how to get their phone number. And again, we'll be giving these slides to you afterwards. So we have our links to our local health and human services. We have phone numbers here. We have our area agencies of aging. So there's multiple agencies that you have to deal with when you have a child with a disability or you're a person with a disability. And it's important to know for what services to what agency that you need to contact. So our LifePath systems, again, for Collin County, MetroCare systems for Dallas County. And I am still going blank on what East Texas is. Now, for the mental health issues, you have the North Texas Behavioral Health Authority. they're the primary contact, and then they start directing you where you need to go to get your local services. So CLASS, Community Living Assistance and Supports Services. And there are so many acronyms in the world that supposedly I'm an expert. I'm supposed to know most of these, but sometimes I need my own little cheat sheet myself. And so that's okay that we don't know what everything means. Um, but you have to know that you need to get access to it, and you need to get on interest list to be eligible to get access to it. So one thing that all these waivers is that you have to have a disability that occurred before the child was age 22. And that is what the federal law says. They have just changed that for the ABLE account. They changed it to, I think, age 46, but that's to help the military people that become disabled through the service. But that is the only program that the ABLE account that allows for people that they get their disability after the age of 22. So your deaf, blind, and multiple disabilities, that's one of the seven. Your home and community-based services, that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about my experience after this once we go over the overview. Medically dependent children program, this is for 20 and under. It changes to the Star Plus home community-based services once you go over 21. It's kind of the similar program, but it's the age difference. You go to a different agency and different Medicaid providers that manage those, and they have in each county has different contracts with different HMOs or MCOs, sorry, managed care organizations. Then we have the Texas Home and Living waiver. It has to do again with the intellectual disability. The Yes waiver we talked a little bit earlier about, but again, this is more primarily about mental health services. And so we're going to kind of go into the parent perspective on the HCS waiver. So you actually get the waiver. And so, what does that mean? The first choice you have to make is who are you going to have help you manage this waiver? Because there's agencies that you have to select. There's a whole list of them, and they have pros and cons. There are agencies that are, that have as few as 50 families, and there's agencies that are nationwide. And so you have what I call the mom and pop level, you have the kind of the business level, and then you have the corporate level that go nationwide. And so it's a personal choice of which one you choose. There's pros and cons to all of it. And, that's just one of the things that you have to start figuring out. The good news is if you're unhappy with the services you get from that provider, there is a process to change providers. And so you would go through your local MHMR agency, who also is with you all along the ways. So there's a concept called Consumer Directed Service, or CDS, or agency. So if you go with CDS, that means you hire and fire your employees that provide respite care, personal care services, cares that services that goes directly to your child. The thing is that on that, you have to manage the payroll, you have to manage the hire and firing process, and you still have to have a third party agency that processes that payroll, and you have to select an agency for that. And there's again the same small, big, large concept there. So when my son was under the age of 18, I chose community um, directed services, CDS, because I wanted to have more control of who came into my house. Because if you choose agency, they hire and fire the staff, and you get what you get who comes into your house. And we did that for a little while, and we were not happy with how that worked out for us personally. And so we did pursue that consumer directed services. And once my dad retired, I actually hired my father to be his aide for a few years. So my father he worked for Social Security Administration. So this was one of his first jobs he actually got uh, payroll taxes taken from. So it was a different experience for him. So when Freddie turned over 18, I chose an agency, and we'll kind of go into the reasons to that. Um, When he turns 18, if you choose CDS, you still have the choice to hire and fire, but the services and guidelines are a little bit different. There's something that you call host home. And so to be considered a host home, you have to go through the process of guardianship. And that's a whole other thing that we won't get into. But guardianship is it's a process that you have to petition the state to be able to manage your child's needs. You have to demonstrate they don't have the capacity or the ability to do that. And then you have to take some classes. You have to hire an attorney. You have to go to court. And then the judge decides whether, he will award um, guardianship to you, or this child does not need guardianship. They can just be supported. So there are legal guidelines that you have to follow to get that capacity. Our situation that we were able to obtain guardianship, and every year we still have to reapply and write a report of how to do that. Um, but the host home, once we have guardianship, that we are his quote foster home or his host home. It's kind of like a foster home, but it's not the foster care system. And we could actually host home another individual with a disability if we chose to. And so there are individuals that do not live in a group home that do better in a host home, and there are people out there that have host homes and they have two or three individuals with disabilities that they manage, and there's payments for that, and there are responsibilities as well. And so if it's your own child, that payment is tax free because there's a law that talks about that, and so that does help the household. And the main reason that we do that is that it helps us take care of him now, but it also helps us build a fund for his future when we're no longer able to take care of him. And so that's how we allocate the funds, because we're fortunate to be able to do that. But this definitely helps us to accomplish those goals. So in HCS, we do have an annual planning meeting with this agency that we've chosen and the local MHMR. So we're in Denton County, so we have Denton MHMR. So the Denton MHMR, he has a caseworker. They contact him monthly on phone, and they ask him how he's doing, how he's progressing on his goals, and does he still like living at home? And those are the three main questions. Now, the caseworker has to see him physically at least once every 3 months. Sometimes that can be at his school, it can be at his day hab program, and they do have to come into the home at least a few times a year. So it feels somewhat intrusive, but I've learned to appreciate the connection there, because there's somebody that is outside of the family that's making sure that his needs are met regardless of how we treat him and how a family may or may not treat their families. Because unfortunately, not everybody treats their family members with disabilities with the respect and care that they deserve, and that's why we have these agencies set up this way. And so feel like it's kind of I feel like I've proved myself, but I understand and I appreciate the steps that have to be taken to protect him for the rest of his life. So I've kind of said some of this stuff. They, rotating, it makes me feel better to know that there's an outside eyes going into a school, and that that they see his team at his school, at his day program, and that they can say he loves it there, or he's doing great, or you might want to check in to see how things are going, because they get that outside feedback is important, because we definitely have my son's best interests at heart. I also have to write reports to the agency. I have to write a report on his daily activities. I have to check mark to make sure that I'm supporting all of his needs. I have to keep a binder, and I have a picture at the end. It's kind of overwhelming. You'll see it when I get there. But we have to do every 3 months. We have to do a safety drill. We have to we have to do simulate that we have a fire in the house and we have the alarms go off. And what do? We have to do every so often. We have to do it when we're awake. We have to do it when we're asleep, and they have guidelines. And so we have to do that. I have to document, how that went. Then I have to send that in and keep a copy of that in my binder. We have to also do hazardous weather because we do have a lot of hazardous weather here in Texas. That is for sure. And so we have our spot, we have a written plan of where we're supposed to go for this type of weather. It's our washing room. For our fire, we go outside the door. We go to the mailbox next door to the left, and we have the specific plans that we have written out that this is our safety plan, and then we practice those safety plans. And so this helps the individual with a disability to have a routine, just like they do safety drills at school. That you have these routines because if you're unable to get the adult child or the child to do what they're supposed to do, that can be life threatening. Again, I use that word intrusive because it does feel intrusive, but I've accepted it. And it's a small price to pay for the comfort to know that, even if I have loved ones or relatives take care of them when we're unable to know that they're still being kind of watched, they're still being supported, and that he's being supported, it's worth it. So I understand the need, and I appreciate the support that happens. And here's the famous picture. It's literally, I'm looking up right now. It's with an eyeball. And those are all the pieces of paper that I've had to keep over the last 6, 7 years to make sure that I've documented that I've taken care of him and that I've done what I'm supposed to do, and that the state they've come in one time and they've audited me, and they've taken out my most current binder. It would be this binder, which I have not filed these papers that go into this binder. And so when I'll get notice, they don't surprise you. They give you some notice, and the agency does help support that to make sure you have the right documentation, because the agency they get audited a lot of times too, and they have paperwork just like this for our kids at their agency. And my agency is located in Denton, and so I've been up there and I've seen my son's file. They have a binder that's kind of more like this size, but they don't have all these because I guess they get to get rid of some over the years. And I've learned, sometimes you get asked about stuff that happened 5 years ago, and so that's this pile over here. And so I've it's very important that you have paperwork that you support that you're doing what you're saying, and that you can prove that you're doing what you're saying. And I guess it got twice. So Partners Text, this is our website for Partners Resource Network. You can go on there to get information about regional coordinators, a calendar of events, our fact sheets, newsletters, and news affecting education. We also do statewide webinars with sped techs that Sarah is involved with, and we do those about every couple months. And so those are very informative and have, you know, very good professionals to help us to understand how to manage our kids. So this is our contact information. And so if we can, do we have any questions in the chat, or do we have any? You're on mute, Sarah.
Thank you. I don't see anything in the chat. Jim, we did have someone tell us that it was the name of the MHMR you were trying to think of as Lakes Regional
That's it. That's
MHMR,
it. That's it.
and it's in Greenville, Texas.
Yeah,
So we
they
did
have,
get that answered.
yeah.
But I don't see any other questions here. Of course, all of Jim's contact information and PRN's contact information is there on the screen for you. In addition to sending a copy of today's presentation, this webinar was recorded and it will be posted on the Region 10 website. I will also include a link to where that has been shared so that you are able to access that and watch again later if you would like to, or share that with anyone else who may be interested.
Yeah.
At this time, I am going to ask Ashton to launch our poll just to get some feedback from you about today's presentation. And we do want to thank everyone for being here today.
Yes, also created a document that's a kind of a was supposed to be a one pager, but I think it turned into like three. Yeah, 3 pages that have kind of the links that we talked about here all in one place that we'll also send out. And, it's just the waivers are scary. But they're helpful and they do provide resources for the long term. And I've been, r- relatively happy about, the meetings, the planning, the support, the nurses, doing physicals, just knowing that the state is supporting us and his needs now and in the future, it does bring a degree of comfort that it helps because, when you have a lifelong situation, it can feel overwhelming. So thank everybody for participating and thanks for doing this poll because part of our grant requirements is that we have to show that we're delivering services and we have to show how well we've delivered the services. And I've gotten a lot better at answering other polls from other people after doing this job for a few years. So I know we're a survey society nowadays.
We'll leave that up on the screen for you for a few minutes, and then we'll go ahead and end here, probably about 12:35. So thank you again for being here.
And if you do have you think of a question, you can put it in the chat for the next minute or two, or again, you can contact me. Um, and I'm happy to talk you through these situations because that's what we do. Man, I'm glad somebody said Lakes Regional. I was just going nuts trying to think of it.